The Lone Star Phantom. Chapter 1. A small town's silent terror. In the quiet town of Elmswood, Texas, a series of inexplicable murders began to unsettle the residents. Elmswood was a place where everyone knew each other, where the simplicity of life was cherished. Yet a darkness had descended upon this peaceful town, brought by a figure who would soon be known as the Lone Star Phantom. The first victim, a young woman named Sarah Harper, was found in a secluded park. Her body lay cold and lifeless, her eyes wide open in a final moment of terror. The police were quick to arrive, but their investigation yielded little. The culprit had evaded capture like a ghost. The most striking detail was the unusual symbol etched onto her forehead, a star with a serpentine tail, intricately carved with precision. The symbol was both mesmerizing and horrifying, a grotesque signature of the killer's work. As the news spread, fear took root in the hearts of Elmswood's residents. It was the kind of town where doors were left unlocked and children played freely in the streets. Now, an air of paranoia hung over every household. The once vibrant town square became eerily quiet as people hurried through their errands, avoiding eye contact and exchanging whispered speculations about the identity of the killer. At Sarah's funeral, the sense of communal grief was palpable. Neighbors comforted each other, but their eyes were clouded with fear. The local newspaper ran a headline that would haunt the town for weeks: "Phantom strikes Elmswood." The reality of the situation was sinking in, and it was terrifying. Chapter 2. A Grim Pattern. The town's unease grew as two more bodies were discovered within a week of the first murder. Each victim bore the same haunting symbol on their foreheads. The police, already stretched thin, were at a loss. There were no signs of struggle, no fingerprints, no clear motive. The murders seemed random, yet the precision of the symbol suggested a deliberate, calculated intent. The second victim, Tom Lawson, was a local businessman known for his charitable contributions to the community. He was found in his office, his desk meticulously organized, as if he had been expecting a normal day. The third victim, an elderly woman named Margaret Green, was discovered in her garden, the flowers she loved so dearly, now a silent witness to her brutal end. The symbol on her forehead seemed almost to mock the serenity of her surroundings. As the body count rose, so did the panic. Parents kept their children indoors, neighbors eyed each other with suspicion, and once the friendly atmosphere of Elmswood turned cold. The police chief, a man named Robert Wilkins, called in reinforcements and requested help from the state authorities. He knew they needed outside expertise to catch the killer who was turning their town into a nightmare. A town meeting was held at the local community center. Chief Wilkins addressed the concerned citizens, trying to reassure them while concealing his own doubts. The mood was tense, with voices rising in fear and frustration. The community's unity was fraying, and the phantom's shadow loomed over them all. Chapter 3. Enter the Detective. Detective John Harris, a seasoned investigator from Houston, was assigned to the case. Harris was known for his meticulous nature and his ability to see what others missed. He arrived in Elmswood with a sense of determination, aware that the small town's police force was in over its head. As Harris walked through the scene of the crimes, he noted the precision with which the symbol was carved. It was not merely a mark of identification, but a deliberate, calculated signature. Each line was perfect, each curve exact. Harris knew that this level of detail required time and focus, indicating that the killer was methodical and disciplined. Harris's reputation for solving complex cases had preceded him, and the local police officers looked to him with a mixture of hope and desperation. He spent hours interviewing the families of the victims, combing through their backgrounds and searching for any connection that might link them. But the victims appeared to have little in common. Different ages, different social circles, different lives. The only commonality was the symbol, and Harris knew that unlocking its meaning was the key to catching the so-called Lone Star Phantom. Harris took to the streets, blending in with the townsfolk, listening to their stories and fears. His keen eyes observed everything: the body language of the nervous shopkeeper, the whispers between neighbors, the subtle change in the town's rhythm. He was searching for any clue that might reveal the Phantom's identity. Chapter 4: The Semiotician's Insight. Joining Harris was Dr. Emily Carter, a renowned semiotician from the University of Texas. Dr. Carter's expertise in symbols and their meanings was unparalleled. She arrived in Elmswood with a portfolio filled with examples of ancient and modern symbols, ready to delve into the mystery that had stumped the local authorities. Upon examining the symbol, Dr. Carter surmised that it was a message, though its full meaning eluded her. She spent hours analyzing the star with the serpentine tail, comparing it to symbols used by various cultures and secret societies. The precision of the carving indicated that the Phantom had a deep understanding of symbolism, perhaps even an obsession. Dr. Carter and Detective Harris formed an uneasy alliance. Both were experts in their fields, but their approaches were vastly different. Harris relied on intuition and experience, while Carter depended on academic rigor and theoretical analysis. Yet, they were bound by their shared goal of stopping the Phantom. They began to see the symbol as a potential key to understanding the killer's motives, a puzzle piece that, when placed correctly, might reveal the full picture. Dr. Carter set up a temporary office in the town library, surrounding herself with books and papers. She compared the symbol to various historical references, noting similarities and differences. Her process was methodical, each finding meticulously recorded. She hoped that somewhere in the annals of history, a clue would emerge. Chapter 5: The First Letter. The Phantom's first letter arrived at the police station on a dreary Monday morning. It was a plain white envelope addressed in neat block letters to the Elmswood Police Department. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in cryptic messages and taunts. The letter was a chilling mixture of riddles and mockery, further compounded by the symbol that now haunted the town. Detective Harris and Dr. Carter pored over the letter, each word a potential clue, each line a piece in the puzzle they were so desperate to solve. The Phantom seemed to delight in their confusion, using the letter to flaunt his intelligence and to mock their efforts. The symbol appeared at the bottom of the letter, bold and defiant. The letter read, "To those who seek me, look not in the obvious places. The star leads the way, but only if you understand its language. Your efforts amuse me, but you will never catch me. I am the shadow in your town, the whisper in the night. I am the Lone Star Phantom." Harris felt a surge of frustration as he read the letter. The Phantom was playing a game, and the stakes were the lives of Elmswood's residents. Dr. Carter, however, saw an opportunity. The letter provided a direct line to the killer's thoughts, a window into his twisted mind. She began to analyze the language, the structure, and the symbol, hoping to find a pattern or a clue that would lead them to the Phantom. As the police chief read the letter aloud to his officers, the room fell silent. The weight of the Phantom's words were pressed down on them, the challenge clear. Harris and Carter knew they had to work faster, think smarter, and somehow get ahead of a killer who always seemed a step ahead. Chapter 6: A New Victim. Despite their efforts, another body was discovered 2 days after the letter arrived. This time, the Phantom had left the body in the town square, a brazen act meant to instill fear and demonstrate his power. The victim, a middle-aged man named George Thompson, was a beloved high school teacher. He was found early in the morning, the symbol more prominent than ever, etched deeply into his forehead. The town square, usually a bustling hub of activity, was now a crime scene. The yellow police tape flapped in the wind as officers tried to keep the curious onlookers at bay. The symbol, with its precise lines and curves, seemed to scream at Harris and Carter, urging them to understand its meaning. The pressure mounted as the town's anxiety grew. Dr. Carter examined the symbol with renewed intensity, her mind racing through possibilities. She considered the cultural significance of stars, the mythological meanings of serpents, and the historical use of similar symbols. Harris focused on the victim, interviewing students, colleagues, and friends. He was searching for any detail, no matter how small, that might connect Thompson to the other victims. The atmosphere in Elmswood grew more tense with each passing hour. The residents demanded answers, but none were forthcoming. The phantom had struck again, and the town felt more helpless than ever. Harris and Carter knew they were running out of time. Each new victim was a blow to their morale, but also a challenge they were determined to meet. At George Thompson's memorial service, the community's grief turned to anger. The residents of Elmswood were no longer just afraid, they were outraged. They looked to Harris and Carter for answers, for justice, but the puzzle was far from complete. Chapter 7: Clues in the Past. Dr. Carter delved into the history of symbols, searching for anything that might relate to the Phantom's mark. She spent long nights in the library, poring over ancient texts and obscure manuscripts. One night, she came across an old manuscript that mentioned a similar symbol used by a secret society in medieval Europe. The society, known for its brutal enforcement of justice, used the star and serpent symbol to mark those they deemed guilty. This discovery, though intriguing, did not provide all the answers. The symbol's use by a secret society suggested a connection to themes of justice and retribution. But how did this apply to the Phantom's victims? Dr. Carter presented her findings to Harris, who listened intently. He knew they were on the right track, but more pieces of the puzzle were needed. Harris focused on the victims, looking for any connections between them. He interviewed their families, friends, colleagues, searching for commonalities. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. All the victims had been involved in a local community project years ago, a project aimed at revitalizing the town's historic district. It was a tenuous link, but it was the first real connection they had found. As Harris and Carter shared their findings, they realized that the Phantom was likely someone with a deep knowledge of the town's history and its residents. The project had brought together a diverse group of people, but it had also been controversial. Some had opposed the changes, believing they threatened the town's heritage. The Phantom's choice of victims began to make sense. They were all involved in a project that had sparked strong emotions. Dr. Carter's research into the secret society's practices revealed that their use of symbols was both a warning and a declaration. The star and serpent marked those who had betrayed the society's ideals. This parallel gave Carter and Harris a new perspective on the Phantom's motives, suggesting that he saw his actions as a form of righteous retribution. Chapter 8: The Second Letter. Another letter arrived, this one more mocking than the first. The Phantom seemed to relish the cat and mouse game he was playing. His language was playful yet sinister, filled with hints that only deepened the mystery. The letter read, "You are getting closer, but you still do not see. The past holds the key, yet you search the present. The star will guide you, but only if you learn its truth. The dance continues, and I lead. You follow, always a step behind. Catch me if you can." Harris and Carter's frustration grew, but so did their resolve. The Phantom was toying with them, but his arrogance was also providing them with clues. Dr. Carter focused on the language and structure of the letter, analyzing the rhythm and word of choice. She believed that the Phantom's writing style could reveal more about his personality and his motives. Harris, on the other hand, concentrated on the victims and the community project. He interviewed more people involved in the project, looking for anyone who had expressed strong opposition or had a potential motive. The list of suspects grew, but none stood out as a clear candidate. The Phantom remained elusive, a shadow that danced just out of reach. The letter also included references to specific dates and events from Elmswood's past. Dr. Carter cross-referenced these with the victims' histories, trying to find a common thread. Each clue, though cryptic, brought them a step closer to understanding the Phantom's twisted logic. Chapter 9: The Phantom's Message. The third letter arrived, containing a chilling promise that the killings would continue until the balance was restored. The letter was more detailed than the previous ones, filled with cryptic references to past events and the idea of justice. Harris and Carter knew that the Phantom believed he was carrying out a form of twisted justice. The letter read, "The scales must be balanced, the guilty must pay. You search in the dark, but the truth is there, waiting to be seen. The star guides me, and through it, I see the path. Each death is a step closer to restoring the balance. Stop me if you can, but know that I am driven by a force you cannot understand." Harris and Carter worked tirelessly, piecing together the clues. They revisited old case files, re-interviewed witnesses, and searched for any detail that might have been overlooked. They knew they were close, but the Phantom's promise of more killings hung over them like a dark cloud. The town's fear was palpable, and the pressure to solve the case was immense. Dr. Carter focused on the language of the letters, trying to glean any psychological insights that might help identify the killer. She noted the patterns in his writing, the recurring themes of justice and retribution, and the careful, deliberate structure. Harris continued to dig into the backgrounds of the victims, searching for any additional connections that might help narrow down the list of suspects. The town's newspaper ran an editorial, pleading for calm and cooperation. The editorial also speculated about the Phantom's motives, drawing parallels to historical cases and urging residents to come forward with any information. The pressure on Harris and Carter intensified, with the eyes of the entire community upon them. Chapter 10. Closing in. Harris and Carter narrowed down their list of suspects, focusing on individuals connected to the community project. Their investigation led them to a reclusive man named Victor Malone, who had a history of mental instability and a fascination with symbols. Malone had been a vocal opponent of the project, believing it threatened the town's historical integrity. His passion for the town's history and his obsessive nature made him a prime suspect. They began to survey Malone, hoping to catch him before he struck again. They watched his movements, noted his interactions, and looked for any signs that might confirm their suspicions. Malone was careful though, almost too careful, but his behavior raised enough red flags to keep Harris and Carter on edge. As they dug deeper into Malone's past, they discovered more troubling details. He had been involved in several altercations with members of the community project, and his writings were filled with references to justice and retribution. He had a deep knowledge of symbols and their meanings, further connecting him to the Phantom's signature. Harris and Carter set up a rotating surveillance team to monitor Malone's activities. They reviewed hours of footage, noting his meticulous routines and solitary lifestyle. They knew they had to be cautious. One wrong move could send Malone into hiding, or, even worse, provoke him into striking again. Chapter 11. The Final Letter. The Phantom's final letter arrived, filled with cryptic references and symbolic language. The letter was longer than the previous ones, and it seemed to contain more taunts and hints. Harris and Carter worked tirelessly, piecing together the clues. They knew they had little time, and the pressure was immense. The letter read, "The end is near. The balance will be restored, and the guilty will pay. You have searched, you have followed, but you still do not see. The star will guide you, but only if you learn its truth. The final act is upon us, and I will watch as the scales tip. Farewell, until we meet in the shadows." Harris and Carter felt the weight of the letter's words. They knew the Phantom was planning something final, something that would complete his twisted sense of justice. They rushed to analyze the letter, looking for any clue that might lead them to his next target. The language, the structure, the references, all were dissected with meticulous care. Carter noted that the letter's references to the final act and the scales tipping indicated an imminent conclusion. She cross-referenced these phrases with historical events in Elmswood, trying to pinpoint a location or a time that the Phantom might find significant. Meanwhile, Harris intensified his surveillance on Malone, knowing that they were running out of time. All evidence pointed towards an old memorial house that once belonged to an obscure poetry writer that had started his career in this town. With little else to go on, they decided to go there and hope beyond hope that they are correct and an innocent will be spared. Chapter 12. The Confrontation. In the darkened building on the outskirts of town, Harrison Carter found Malone standing over his intended victim. A young woman who was bound and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. The symbol of the star with the serpentine tail was drawn on the floor around her in a grotesque mockery of protection. Malone's eyes were wild, filled with a fervor that bordered on madness. He believed he was carrying out a righteous act, that his actions were justified by the symbols and the balance they represented. Harrison Carter approached cautiously, their hearts pounding with adrenaline. Harris called out to Malone, trying to reason with him. Malone, driven by his delusions, refused to listen. He screamed about justice and retribution, his voice echoing through the empty building. In a desperate bid to save the woman, Harrison Carter lunged at Malone. A brutal struggle ensued. Malone fought with the strength of a man possessed, his fury making him formidable. He swung wildly at Harris, who blocked the blows as best he could, while Carter tried to restrain him from behind. During the altercation, Malone pulled out a knife and slashed at Harris, grazing his arm. The fight intensified as Harrison Carter struggled to disarm him. In the chaos, Malone tripped and fell, the knife clattering away. As he hit the ground, Harrison Carter pounced, trying to hold him down. Malone, in his desperation, thrashed violently, but the combined weight and determination of Harrison Carter overpowered him. The struggle reached a horrific climax when Malone, in his frenzied state, attempted to grab the knife again. Harris, seeing the danger, kicked the weapon away and tackled Malone with full force. The impact was devastating. Malone's head struck the concrete floor with a sickening crack, and he lay still, moaning in pain. Blood started to pool around Malone as he lay incapacitated. Harrison Carter quickly secured him and freed the terrified woman. The police and paramedics arrived shortly after, taking Malone into custody and rushing him to the hospital. The fight had left him severely wounded, his spine damaged in the fall. The doctors confirmed he would be permanently disabled, likely never to walk again. As the news spread, Elmswood breathed a collective sigh of relief. The terror of the Lone Star Phantom was finally over. Yet, a new debate emerged in the community. Malone's crimes were heinous, and many argued that he did not deserve medical care or compassion. Others, however, believed that despite his monstrous actions, basic humanity required that he be cared for. In the hospital, Malone lay immobilized, a stark contrast to the fearsome figure he had been. The symbol that once represented terror now seemed a hollow echo of his broken form. Public opinion remained divided, with heated discussions in the town square and in the local newspaper. Harrison Carter, their mission complete, prepared to part ways. They had formed an uneasy yet effective partnership, each respecting the other's expertise. They stood outside the hospital, reflecting on the case that had brought them together. Their bond forged in the crucible of fear and determination. Carter returned to her academic pursuits, her insights into symbols and human behavior deepened by this experience. Harris went back to Houston, ready to tackle his next case with the same dogged determination. Elmswood, though scarred, began to heal. The community, united in their relief, started to rebuild the sense of safety and trust that had been shattered. The shadow of the Lone Star Phantom had lifted, leaving behind a town stronger and more resilient. If you've enjoyed the story and would like to hear some more, do let us know in the comments below. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us a lot. Thanks.